Instead of having orange juice and oats in the morning, which are carbs and turn to glucose in our body, have eggs. I'm not even kidding. Eggs are better for you than having oats and juice in the morning for your heart, absolutely. Hello angels, and welcome back to the Glucose Goddess Show. I'm Justine Chuspé, a French biochemist, very interested in helping you understand your body and food and health. So today we're going to talk about the humble egg. Eggs. My gosh, you guys, eggs have had quite the reputation journey over the decades. I still meet people who think that eggs are really bad for your heart and are going to give you heart disease. There are still some doctors that believe this. So we need to have a deep look at what's going on with eggs, what they actually do to our health, because many of us are still stuck in the 90s when it comes to what eggs do to us. And many things from the 90s we've moved on from, so it's time to move on from bad egg science. So let's get into it. First things first, what is in an egg? So this is an egg, and we have the yellow or the yolk of the egg, and we have the white part of the egg. So the yolk of the egg is mostly fat. So it has 5 grams of fat, of which 185 milligrams of cholesterol. Important word, cholesterol, for this episode. It has 3 grams of protein, and it has a ton of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants that are super healthy and good for us. And the egg white is basically just water. It's like 90% water, 4 grams of protein, no fat, no cholesterol. And because the cholesterol in eggs was seen as something that was really bad, people in the 90s started having egg white omelets. So they would get rid of the yolk with the bad cholesterol and just have the white of the egg. Because the belief was cholesterol in the egg will give you heart disease. So where did this belief originate? It originated in the 1950s. There is probably one of the most famous early nutrition studies that came from the 50s. It's called the 7 Countries Study by a man called Ancel. So in his study, he published very important, famous graphs that I'm going to show right here. So these graphs showed a perfect correlation between how much fat was consumed in a country and how many people died of heart disease in that country. So as you can see here, you have Japan, Italy, England and Wales, Australia, Canada, USA. And for each of these countries, the fat consumption goes up and the death by heart disease goes up. And he had the same kind of graph for cholesterol, which is a type of fat. So if a country eats a lot of fat, they eat a lot of cholesterol. And here it's the same thing. So total cholesterol consumed was perfectly associated with death from heart disease. The world kind of blew up. Ancel was on the cover of Time magazine. Scientists and doctors were finally like, oh my God, we have the answer for all of these heart disease cases that are going up. It must be the fat and the cholesterol that we're eating. This really blew up. It was one of the first big discoveries, or supposedly discoveries, we'll get to that in a sec, in the world of nutrition. So everybody accepted this, that if you eat cholesterol, if you eat fat, it means you're going to have a higher risk of dying of heart disease. It means, well, they thought it meant that you would get cholesterol in your arteries and bad fats in there, and that you would die of heart disease. This was the belief. Time for a quick break to tell you about the supplement I have developed, Anti-Spike Formula. Now listen, in my years of research, I've understood one key thing. Keeping our glucose levels steady is the foundation of physical and mental health, no question. And if I could only take one supplement for the rest of my life to help me reduce my glucose spikes and keep my glucose levels steady, it would be anti-spike formula. I created anti-spike with two really powerful natural plant molecules in it. The first one is mulberry leaf extract. And listen to this. In a review study of 12 randomized clinical trials on over 600 people, scientists found that mulberry leaf extract significantly reduces our glucose spikes after a meal by up to 40%. It also significantly reduces our insulin spike after a meal by up to 40%, and it reduces our fasting glucose levels by 8 milligrams per deciliter after just 2 months. So this molecule from mulberry leaf reduces the absorption of glucose in our bloodstream. It actually slows down how quickly starches turn to glucose in our bloodstream, therefore creating a massive reduction in the glucose spike of our meal. The second main molecule in anti-spike formula is a molecule from lemon called eriocitrine. It's the molecule that makes lemons yellow, but it also has a really cool effect on our gut. It basically helps our gut produce more GLP-1. Clinical trials show us that GLP-1 production increases by 17% after just 2 months of taking it. More GLP-1 means healthier glucose levels. I take 2 capsules of anti-spike formula every single day before the meal of my day highest in carbs and sugars. So go to antispike.com to see all the science behind these ingredients, to see testimonials from thousands of people who've tried it, and to order your own anti-spike formula bottle and try it for yourself. Then there was another study published in 1961, the Framingham heart study, also a very, very famous study. And in it, the researchers reported that high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and smoking were major heart disease factors. So again, people were like, oh my God, high cholesterol is gonna make me have heart disease. So if I eat cholesterol from any foods containing cholesterol like eggs, I'm gonna get heart disease. Everybody believed this, it was accepted. And this led to one of the most damaging public health campaigns, decisions, guidelines that are still affecting our health today. This led to the movement of low-fat diets. This happened in the 1970s and the 1980s. So in 1977, the dietary guidelines and the American Heart Association said you should not eat more than 300 milligrams of cholesterol per day. So no more than 2 eggs per day. Again, because they believed if you eat cholesterol, it's going to give you heart disease. So people started fearing all kinds of animal fats, from eggs to full-fat yogurt, and then they started eating really low-fat products. But the thing is, in low-fat products, to make them taste good, manufacturers put a lot of sugar. So people started eating lots and lots of sugar. This turned out to be disastrous for our health, but people didn't know back then. They really believed that a very low-fat diet was really healthy for them. But turns out there were fundamental problems with the research that started all this movement. For instance, in the 7 countries study by Ancel, guess what he did? He decided to leave out of this graph the countries where there was high fat consumption but low heart disease mortality, like Germany, like France, where people eat a lot of fat but don't die of heart disease that much. And so he left them out of the graph because it wouldn't fit the narrative that he was trying to show. Second big thing, these studies were associative, meaning they just saw correlations. It's like saying, I don't know, people who have long toenails watch a lot of TV. That doesn't mean that the watching a lot of TV causes the long toenails. It just means we happen to see them a lot in the same population, that people who watch TV also tend to have long toenails. But there were no studies, no clinical trials, for example, that actually tried to prove that it worked in a causative kind of way. This was all based on associative studies, which are a great tool and they're fantastic, but until they're really corroborated by proper clinical trials where we understand the mechanisms deeper and we can show with a control group and randomization that it really has an effect, it's a bit dangerous to draw conclusions based on associative evidence, because again, there could be confounders there that we have no idea about. Even though there were problems with this research, the guidelines continued. So in the 1980s, the dietary guidelines for Americans reinforced the 300 milligrams daily cholesterol limit. often, of course, saying you should eat fewer eggs to be in this limit, and this was mirrored across the world. Here's a list of other countries that also had a cholesterol limit in their dietary guidelines: UK, Australia, France, Canada, China, Japan, and also the World Health Organization. Furthermore, any doctor who went to medical school in the 70s, 80s, or 90s was told that eating cholesterol will give you heart disease. Now, since then, we've thankfully learned the truth, which is that eating cholesterol does not cause heart disease, which is that eating eggs is not bad for your heart. And scientists in the early 2000s started looking at this more closely. So I want to bring you on a little journey here. What exactly is cholesterol? Why does it have such a bad rep? Cholesterol is a molecule in our body that is essential to life. It creates our cell membranes, and we are composed of trillions of cells. If we didn't have proper cell membranes, our body would not be able to exist, to survive. We would not be alive. It's essential, also, cholesterol is essential to produce things like hormones. It also creates the protective shield around our neurons. It protects our brain cells. Cholesterol is a very, very, very important molecule. And in diseases where people cannot make cholesterol, you see a lot of malformations, a lot of issues with development, with cognitive impairment, and so forth. So cholesterol is not to be feared. Cholesterol is a very healthy, helpful molecule. Now, here is the key discovery that started shifting people's understanding of cholesterol. You remember how I said that people used to think, and scientists used to think, that the cholesterol you eat becomes the cholesterol in your blood vessels, becomes the cholesterol that could harm your heart health? Well, scientists in the 2000s finally understood that actually the cholesterol you eat does not become the cholesterol in your veins. The scientists found that our liver actually produces 80% of the cholesterol that we need, that we have. Only 20% of the cholesterol in our body actually comes from eating cholesterol. Most of the cholesterol that you eat, you just excrete right out. Your body will create the one that it needs, and only a very small fraction of the cholesterol you eat will actually make its way into your body. And you remember Ancel, the person who did the 7 countries study? Even him knew that eating cholesterol-containing foods did not increase blood cholesterol. He said in 1977, there is no connection whatsoever between cholesterol in food and cholesterol in blood. Then a very big study in 2009, a review study called, "Is there a correlation between dietary and blood cholesterol?" So they looked at all existing meta-analyses on cholesterol, dietary and blood cholesterol, and heart disease, and they confirmed that dietary cholesterol, especially from eggs, does not, and I quote, significantly impact blood cholesterol or increase cardiovascular risk for most people. After this research came out, and because of the mounting amount of evidence, in 2015, the US dietary guidelines were updated, and they removed completely cholesterol limits. They said we no longer have to have a limit on eggs. This was in 2015. We no longer have to worry about foods that contain cholesterol. And they started saying what actually matters is saturated fats and trans fats. But cholesterol, eating cholesterol-containing foods, was no longer an issue. And this was because of the very robust science that had disproven the previously held belief. So what do we do with all this information? You guys know I've been doing my glucose hacks religiously. They are the foundation of my dietary habits, but adding the molecules and anti-spike has really allowed me to get to the next level in a few areas. 1, bloating. I didn't even know that I would get bloated. With anti-spike, I'm like, oh, I used to get bloated. I feel so much better now. 2, energy levels, super consistent. Eagle energy all day. And 3, cravings for sugar. I love sugar. I want to eat chocolate all the time, and anti-spike has given me a feeling of having a total superpower when it comes to my sugar cravings. I don't feel controlled by them anymore at all. It's truly amazing. And I know that these natural molecules are gonna help my long-term fasting glucose and fasting insulin levels, which is so key to physical and mental health and to healthy aging. So go to antispike.com to see all the science behind these ingredients, to see testimonials from thousands of people who've tried it, and to order your own Antispike formula bottle and try it for yourself. Okay, first piece of important information. You don't have to fear eggs. Eggs are really healthy, they're amazing. I have eggs every single day. There doesn't need to be a limit on how many eggs you consume. Cholesterol in eggs is not damaging. But of course, we should still look at heart disease and what's actually going on there. What is the latest evidence and the latest hypothesis around heart disease? So there are a few different hypotheses in the world of heart disease, but now things are starting to get a bit clearer. It's a two-factor approach. First factor for heart disease is small, dense LDL particles of cholesterol. Second factor for heart disease, inflammation and oxidation of particles in your bloodstream. So how do we avoid having unhealthy fats in our blood, and how do we avoid oxidation? The first thing we need to do is reduce sugar, because sugar and high insulin and high glucose levels and fructose in the body will make both of those things worse. It will prompt your liver to produce small particle LDL, and it'll oxidize particles in your bloodstream. So instead of having orange juice and oats in the morning, which are carbs and turn to glucose in our body, have eggs. I'm not even kidding. Eggs are better for you than having oats and juice in the morning for your heart, absolutely. There's a great study called 1 egg a day improves inflammation when compared to an oatmeal-based breakfast without increasing other cardiometabolic risk factors in diabetic patients. So this study shows that people with diabetes, when they replace their oats, their porridge with eggs, the inflammation in their bloodstream, the inflammation that could be causing problematic heart disease, goes down. Yeah, eggs are actually way better for you than a lot of our breakfast foods. And eggs are actually way better for our heart than a lot of the sweet and starchy and highly processed foods that we have in the morning. Also, a very important thing to avoid are trans fats. Trans fats you'll find in hydrogenated oils, such as margarine. So in the low-fat movement, people started replacing butter with things like emulsified vegetable oils, like the plant-based butter. That stuff is terrible for you. It contains trans fats, which are very clearly today linked to heart disease. So avoid any kind of processed vegetable oil-based, solidified, fat-ish, butter-ish stuff. Got it? Another important key factor to look at when you're trying to reduce heart disease risk is to reduce your glucose spikes. Studies show us that even if you have normal levels of fasting glucose levels, meaning you're not pre-diabetic and you don't have diabetes, so glucose spikes on a daily basis are harmful to the cells in your blood vessels. 2 studies I'll mention. The first one is called Postprandial Hyperglycemia as an Etiological Factor in Vascular Disease. Number 2 is Oscillating Glucose is more deleterious to endothelial function and oxidative stress than mean glucose in normal and type 2 diabetic patients. These studies show us that managing our glucose levels is key to help us have a healthy heart and healthy blood vessels. If you want a list of my 10 glucose hacks to manage your glucose spikes easily without needing to give up any foods just by understanding the order and the timing of them, download the PDF in the description of this episode with my 10 glucose hacks. It's free. Click the link in there. You'll get it. It'll be a great place to start if you want to change your health and your diet to help your heart. And finally, most times when you go to the doctors, they're still measuring something called total cholesterol as a measure of heart disease. Now, total cholesterol is really not a very good way to predict if you're going to have heart disease. For example, 50% of people who have a heart attack have normal levels of total cholesterol. So we have to dig a bit deeper. I'm going to give you now a bullet point list of the lab tests you should be running to assess your heart disease risk. So, first things first, look at your triglycerides to HDL ratio. So, measure triglycerides, measure LDL and HDL. Then you do triglycerides to HDL ratio. This gives us information about the small, dense LDL particles that you have in your bloodstream. And the more you have these small, dense LDL particles, the more you're at risk for heart disease. So, this is actually a much better predictor. So here's the equation that you have to do. You divide the level of triglycerides in milligrams per deciliter by the HDL in milligrams per deciliter, okay? you want the result to be less than 2. If it's more than 2, it's problematic. Again, I made another PDF in the description of this episode with all these blood tests and the reference ranges, so you can easily have a look at them. Download that easily. C-reactive protein, that's another really important measure. This measures inflammation. This number should be as low as possible. It should be as close to 0 as you can possibly get it. Then your ApoB number. This is a measure of all potentially problematic fat particles in your blood. It should also be as low as possible. Calcium score should be as low as possible. Insulin resistance should also be as low as possible, as it's a big factor for heart disease. To measure insulin resistance, you want to measure the HOMA-IR ratio. Again, it's all linked and explained in the PDF in this episode. And finally, just remember, your result of bad cholesterol, as in LDL, is not a very good predictor. We need to dig deeper. Now we understand way more than we did just a decade ago. So looking at just total cholesterol and LDL does not give you an accurate enough image of what's actually going on within and of your real, true heart disease risk. Now we know eggs are not bad for us. Eggs are like nature's multivitamin. They have so many minerals and so many fat-soluble vitamins. They're fantastic. They're a good source of protein. I have eggs every single day. They're a great source of choline also. So in terms of how much protein you should be eating, eggs are helpful, but they don't contain that much protein. They're about 7 grams of protein per egg. And if you're 70 kilos or 150 pounds like me, you need 150 grams of protein per day, so that would mean 20 eggs. That being said, even though they're not the best source of protein, they're a great way to start the day. You can have 3 or 4 in the morning to try to get your protein intake up to maintain your muscle mass and feel really good. If you're curious about protein, which is something I'm so happy to talk about because it's so key to eat enough protein, I also have a third free PDF in the description of this episode to calculate how much protein you should be eating to maintain your muscle mass or grow it, which is kind of the goal, and also which foods contain which amounts of protein. So lots of free resources for you. I hope this helped. I hope this was helpful and that you learned a bit and that you're no longer scared of eggs, because eggs are nice and they're not mean. They won't bite you. Eat them. I'll see you next time.